So without further ado, Mr. Rob Park.
Thank you, and thanks to Steve for the clicker, because my clicker died this morning. And also, yeah, thanks for the threat stack talk, so I'm not the only startup on the lineup. So this is just going to be a bit of an experience report, kind of related to some of the things that we're doing at our company. So Intent Media is a travel-based ad network based in New York City. I actually work remotely most of the time, but we're about 7 teams of engineers, so we split them up pretty small, but we're 30-plus software creators. I'll mention that in a minute. So this is kind of as we've seen already, the often used metaphor of kind of old school, pre-agile, pre-DevOps way to operate, or just the way that some people still have to operate. We had this structure at Intent Media till about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and now so we kind of tried to embrace this of trying to integrate the 3 major engineering roles, I guess, for the most part, and this is basically what we moved to, but we really kind of tried to crank it up another level, like turn the dial up to 11. So we actually got rid of the tech ops team, so we have no tech ops team. Ironically, I am the head of technical operations, but actually there is no team, and we actually have no QA team anymore. And beyond that, we got rid of even the titles. Like, there is no operations engineer or tech ops engineer anymore. There's no QA engineers. So basically, the mantra is if you build it, you run it. Unfortunately, you also might inherit it. So that is sort of I guess, leads to some confusion as to who supports this service, and trying to find the person who supports that service. And so that's one thing where we definitely are still trying to improve our communication level there. But basically, the idea of integrating these things closer was to get just tighter feedback loops and shorten communication paths. And for the most part, honestly, it really has worked. And we've seen a lot of evidence internally where it's really worked really well for us. So one other thing that's a little bit tricky to deal with when you have no, say, central operations team or anything like that is how do you manage centralized infrastructure? And so basically, we're trying to outsource everything that we can. So I won't go down the no-ops path, because it's obviously not no-ops, but the teams basically manage their own infrastructure, and where they don't manage their infrastructure is because we have a vendor that manages our infrastructure. So this is kind of how I really look at the communication paths now, is that we have these 7 teams, and it's really much more about, it's not about getting ops to talk to devs, it's really about getting the teams to be able to communicate with one another, and being able to really enable that, because they really have to, different teams own their services, and so now we're moving to more of an ownership model, instead of having this monolithic model where everything is. We do use, for communication in this style, we do use a lot of email, but honestly, in tech, we tend to move away from email for the most part. We use a lot of Google Groups to manage getting lists, and so you get notifications through Google Groups. We have Confluence, which is, where you can, of course, opt in to whether or not you want to watch this or not. But then, of course, we have Slack. And Slack is basically our main channel of operation, especially being remote a lot of the time. But even for people who live in New York and work in New York, there's always somebody that's remote. Actually, all of our conference rooms are also very friendly, remote friendly. They all have good mic setups, good camera setups, and they have there's like a huge TV in every single conference room, so that works out really well. Although I don't know of anybody that uses tmux at our company, because it's a lot of Java. So let's see. So teams, kind of, again, they're very free to free to use whatever tools they want. So we don't necessarily dictate there's no like central Jira that some teams use. Well, a bunch of teams use different tools to manage their stories or their tickets or whatever. We don't actually run into one interesting thing to me is that we don't really run into too much cross-team dependency relationship problems where where's this, or I'm waiting on this particular ticket, because really even if my team is working in Clubhouse, I can easily follow what Pivotal's tracker story is as well. So let's see. Yeah, so this is we kind of as a service, whatever we can, and we definitely just kind of go for whatever the team wants to go with. We do have like a monthly sort of TechOps-oriented cross-squad meeting to try and share across teams what things are working and what things aren't, and where we're looking for other new ways of doing things. But honestly, those aren't really all that exciting. So the cross-team meetings aren't necessarily the best solution for us. We get a lot more that you can really leverage a lot of that information just by monitoring Slack and looking at different channels at different times. And again, that's an opt-in thing, right? So we have a ton of channels. Actually, it's very common for the pattern seems to be that teams will all have their own channel, and they'll also have their own alerts channel to keep the noise separate from the discussion. And people from other teams will often just drop in. They'll drop in for a particular discussion and then drop back out. And then there's some people like me that just tend to lurk on all of these channels and drop in on occasion. I also wanted to mention, like, to me, this is kind of like the communication path that follows with Conway's Law. We definitely started as a more monolithic organization, and we definitely had a very monolithic code base. And over time, especially having moved to individual teams and this more of an individual ownership type approach and trying to divvy up like what the ownerships are, that we've broken a ton of things out of the monolithic repo into their own individual repos. And of course, new services that come up, they'll have their own database, they'll have their own repo, they'll have their own deployment scheme, and their own built pipelines and all of that. Some of the other communication things that we do tend to leverage, like I mentioned, cross-team meetings, although those tend to have kind of limited success. So we try and keep them kind of quick and tidy if we can. Mob programming has been a kind of a newer interest with a lot of the several teams. And so several teams where they'll be, basically this is great for intra-team communication, but also they tend to be really open about it. So it's really easy as someone who's not on a given team to just drop in and sit in with a different team's mob for the afternoon and get a good feel for like how the other team works and also just get a feel for what they're working on. We also do learning reviews. We've been trying to do these for about the last year. Certainly around incidents, but we also do them around non-incidents. So this is kind of the, I guess, newer form of the post-mortem, blameless post-mortem type of thing. And these are scheduled ad hoc, but they definitely have a very clear agenda. We're still trying to figure out like sort of the best ways to conduct them, and certainly the best ways to really make sure we follow up on the remediations that come out of them. But they seem to really encourage cross-team communication and get knowledge of the way the different things work around the organization. So that's been really helpful. What's that?
I know the words. I have some idea what it could be, but can you tell me what it really is? The practical example, how it really looks like?
So have you heard of blameless postmortems? Or we can bring it to the Q&A, I guess, if you want.
Yeah, I'm doing Q&A.
But basically, it's like Dave. If you look up Dave Zwiebeck and like blameless postmortem or learning review, you'll find it. Yeah, and so that's about it, I guess. I tried to keep it tidy. And so yes, we are hiring, especially if you're interested in moving to New York. And and if you want to check out our space, we're actually hosting an open spaces conference that tends to be. So it's open spaces, but the topics tend to revolve around DevOps and continuous integration, continuous delivery, and other things like that. And so we're hosting that at our office. It's a free conference in the middle of October. So check that out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rob.